Welcome everyone to Yissilmissil Productions channel. My name is Steven Yissil, and today we are doing part 3 of the deep dive series of 1900s Chicago film industry. We are reading from Flickering Empire by Michael Glover Smith and Adam Selzer. And today we are starting chapter 3. And that will be the end of part 1 of the book. So, chapter 3, I can't believe I was muted all that time. At least it wasn't too long. So, The Dawn of Exhibition is chapter 3. It's 10 pages. We're going to get through that today. I was just saying before I saw your comment, Jason, that what we were covering in the past 2 deep dives was we had Thomas Edison, introduction to him, The Wizard of Oz, and just the fact that we had movie studios in Chicago in the 1890s. But I don't want to ad-lib too much here. I don't want to give any inaccurates. So today's 10 pages, so it should not be too difficult to get through. There's a few photos in here. But, yeah, other than that, yeah, we might as well begin. Chapter 3. Firstly, let's get our slideshow up. And this is just to give you something to look at while I am reading. So, Chapter 3, The Dawn of Exhibition. The origins of commercial film exhibition, as we now know it, can be traced to April 1894, when the first of Edison's kinetoscope parlors opened in New York City, exhibiting the devices that had originally been planned for the Chicago and the Columbian exhibition. A month later, more parlors sprang up in other cities, including Chicago, Atlantic City, and San Francisco. An advertisement in the Chicago Daily Tribune, probably the first real movie ad to appear in a local paper, simply stated, "The kinetoscope, Edison's latest marvel, out at last and on exhibition at 148 State Street." One has to love that, quote, "at last," unquote, a reference to the device having been long hyped in the Chicago press, tinged with perhaps a hint of ruefulness over the missed opportunity of having it premiere at the World's Fair. Chicago had officially become America's second city in 1890 when census records showed its population had surpassed 1 million residents for the first time, and it had thus overtaken Philadelphia. See that? Philadelphia was number 1. Wasn't New York. There's more lies that we've been told. This growth was in part due to Chicago's annexation of surrounding townships. Throughout the city's most densely populated neighborhood remained the downtown business district known as The Loop, an area bounded today by Adams Avenue, Lake Street, Wabash Avenue, and Wells Street. It makes sense that this teeming neighborhood would host Chicago's first kinetoscope parlor, although determining its exact location on State Street is somewhat problematic. and there's a star here. It says, the street numbering at the time does not correspond to the grid used today. Street numbers then were loosely based on a location's proximity to the Chicago River. Numerous sources place it in Burnham and Root's Masonic Temple at the corner of State and Randolph Streets. By the way, Burnham was the architect that was assigned to build the World's Fair, so he was a Freemason. There you go. Along with Root, which we'll probably find out more about later. It says it's the site of Joffrey Tower today. So that was Burnham and Root's Masonic Temple. They just refit all of these buildings. Though 148 State Street would actually be at the northwest corner of State and Erie Streets, several blocks north prior to the 1909 renumbering of the city, the 1905 Sanborn Fire Insurance maps clearly mark 148 at this location. The Masonic Temple is listed on those maps at 57-63 South State Street. An 1894 edition of the Western Electric magazine states that 10 kinetoscopes were at 148 North State Street and explained that when, quote, 46 distinct views, end quote, pass by per second, although the projection was probably closer to 16 frames per second, quote, the eye is unable to retain separate impressions, and the pictures blend together, giving lifelike motion to the figures and objects portrayed. Among the films being displayed, according to the magazine, were those involving a barbershop, a blacksmith's forge, and wrestlers. But one movie was particularly singled out. Quote, the best is a representation of a cockfight, which is very spirited, end quote. I'd like to watch that here with you guys. I'm thinking we could pull up all of these original, like, kinetoscope clips. We can play them right here, right next to where Edison's at here on the screen. I think that'll be real cool to do. So, I'll take a note. That'll be one of the other deep dives. We'll actually look at these kinetoscopes. And specifically the cockfight. Because I want to see that shit. Yeah, and the wrestling. Absolutely, Jason. And you know, I really wonder... I wonder what kind of wrestling it is. Whether it's on a mat, not in a ring with ropes, but it could be. You know, maybe I'll look that up at the end of the stream. Yeah, we got to find those. We'll find the clips, and I'll make it a point to show it here. But maybe we can search Google after I'm done reading this chapter before we head off. And maybe we'll find them. But I will present them all in an official format here. Alright, continuing on. Though a building at 148 North State Street in contemporary numbering would be at the corner of State and Randolph, albeit across the street from the Masonic building site near where the Gene Siskel Film Center stands today. None of the early newspaper references or ads that use the address 148 North State make any mention of the Masonic building, which was then a notable landmark, towering more than 20 stories high. More likely, the first kinetoscope parlor stood in a storefront on the grounds where 664 North State Street is today. Furthering the confusion is a 1916 Motion Picture World article stating that the first Chicago parlor was in the Ashland Block building located at the northeast corner of Clark and Randolph Streets early in 1894. This kinetoscope parlor, however, seems to have opened in December of 1894, by which time there was already another parlor on State Street and yet another on Wabash Avenue. Whenever on State Street it stood, the first parlor, or wherever on State Street it stood, the first parlor predictably made a fortune, but showing movies to one person at a time had obvious limitations, and Edison's movies were generally mere, quote, proof of concept, unquote, devices that simply showed pictures that could indeed move. These early novelty movies, what film historian Tom Gunning has usefully dubbed the, quote, cinema of attractions, end quote, were all less than a minute long, the length of an average roll of film at the time, and they typically consisted of a single, unedited shot. Edison's cinematographers would point their kinetograph cameras at a given subject and crank the cameras by hand until the film simply ran out. The mostly non-narrative movies that resulted consisted of whatever was happening in front of the cameras during the 30-odd seconds it took to do this. So we're going to look up also that search term here, cinema of attractions. And we'll look more into Tom Gunning. Alright, continuing on. Thomas Edison was a great scientist and a good businessman, but he was neither a visual artist nor an entertainer. He was justifiably proud of the kinetoscope, but he also referred to it in interviews as a, quote, mere toy of no commercial value, end quote. Really wonder how much he really thought of that. This attitude of condescension This attitude of condescension is arguably reflected in the films themselves, which show a marked lack of rigor on the part of the filmmakers. The earliest movies of the Edison Manufacturing Company typically saw their subjects placed in front of a simple black backdrop with the absolute minimum of sets and props necessary to convey the idea of a given scene. Edison's early films are interesting to watch for historical reasons, perhaps most of all because of what they illustrate about what early filmmakers thought the first motion picture audiences wanted to see. Then, as now, the movies played to the audience's appetite for sex and violence. Among the popular early subjects of Edison's films were Sandow, the strongman, flexing his muscles while wearing only a loincloth. There we go. That's the first one. Sandow, the strongman. A comical boxing match. So that's another one. I consider that all related. Theatrical actors John C. Rice and May Irwin kissing. The first ever screen kiss. And the aforementioned film of two men pretending to gamble while observing a real cockfight. That's actually pretty cool. I like that. The fact that there's men, like, gambling. Like, it adds another element to it than just them sitting that camera up in front of them. Then there is the matter of 1897's Seminary Girls, a movie about schoolgirls in nightgowns hitting one another with pillows. A description from a motion picture catalog of the period indicates that the film's distributors were fully aware of the titillating appeal. Quote, a most amusing and lifelike scene in which a number of young ladies clad in their night robes are seen engaged in a midnight frolic, starting in smoking cigarettes, drinking tonic, and ending in a pillow fight. They are suddenly interrupted by the principal appearing on the scene with a candle in hand. When a general stampede occurs, one girl being very conspicuous in her frantic efforts to get under the bed and thus escape the wrath of the school marm, but the scene ends in the young lady being caught, pulled from under the bed, and punished. How do you get all that done in a minute? It looks innocent by today's standards, but yes, it is still a movie about Catholic schoolgirls gone wild. And it says it was directed by James H. White. There's a still here. And it's pretty much exactly what I imagined it would look like. This microphone's in the way. Sorry. So if that was a 30-minute scene, then they smoked a cigarette, they drank, they had a pillow fight, they got caught, and they tried to hide under a bed, and then also got caught from that. And that's all within a minute. That's a lot. Still, while he has never been anyone's idea of an auteur, nobody in 1894 understood the technological side of filmmaking better than Edison. Seminary Girls, like the majority of films produced by the Edison Manufacturing Company, was made in the East Orange, New Jersey studio known as the, quote, Black Maria, end quote. And it says it's pronounced Black Mariah. A building with a retractable roof that was also cleverly designed to rotate on a massive turntable. This innovation enabled Edison's filmmakers to move the entire studio in order to get the most sunlight possible at any time of the day in an age where film stock was notoriously insensitive to light. He moved his film studio to the to the sun in the sky. That's pretty incredible. Also impressive at this time was Edison's understanding of the vital importance that marrying image and sound would eventually hold for the future of the motion picture medium, and the problems that imperfect synchronization between the two could potentially pose. So I'm thinking that Edison actually was planning about the audio and sound coming together, and that's why he said, oh, this little picture thing is just a toy, because he had plans about combining audio to it. It's just a thought with that. In 1894, Chicago Daily Tribune article states, quote, Mr. Edison says his purpose is to combine the phonograph and kinetoscope so that the ear and eye shall both be entertained. This he could easily do with present appliances if were it not for the difficulty of making the phonograph and kinetograph jibe exactly in point of time. Mr. Edison will not take any chances of being made ridiculous by a combination of kinetoscope and phonograph which may get out of harmony. He hopes to photograph the hands of an expert pianist and to have the phonograph so accurately adjusted to the kinetoscope that when the pictured fingers touch the pictured keys, the phonograph will give forth the proper notes at the exact instant. Until he has accomplished this, he does not regard his work in this direction as done. So there you go. That was his goal, to get sound and visual to be combined as a presentable format. Thomas Edison's ingenuity and foresight into methods of motion picture production, however, did not also extend to their exhibition. Exhibitors were clamoring for a way to show the movies to more than one person at a time. The financial benefit of being able to show one film to many people rather than a single viewer was obvious. Edison, however, resisted. The kinetoscopes had become surefire moneymakers, and he believed that implementing a system of large-scale projection would render his profitable machines obsolete. Around the world, though, innovations were happening in spite of him. As had happened with alternating current, Edison's insistence on sticking to his original concept for as long as it could make money would allow others the chance to leave him in the dust. On the other side of the Atlantic, Claude Antoine Lumière The recently retired owner of a photographic firm returned from a trip to Paris to his hometown of Lyons. Claude Antoine told his inventor sons, Auguste and Louis, of a wondrous new invention that he had seen, the kinetoscope. As impressed as he was, he urged them to improve on Edison's machine. Quote, "You can do better," end quote. He said, quote, "Try to get that image out of the box," end quote. Very soon, they did. Film historians often cite December 26th, 1895, when the Lumiere brothers gave the first public presentation in Paris of their invention, the cinematography. It has an E at the end. Cinematograph. Cinematograph. Yeah. A combination movie camera, printer, and projector as the true birth of the movies. This presentation is believed to be the first time 35mm projection occurred before a paying public, as opposed to the movies that had previously been seen only on peep show machines like the kinetoscope or as Muybridge-style slideshows. The German inventor Max Skladanowski did publicly premiere a motion picture projector on November 1st, 1895, but his machine alternated between projecting two different strips of 54mm film. It was a more cumbersome and less effective device than the cinematograph. It's tough to say. And therefore exerted no real influence on the developing cinema. I wonder if the Lumiere brothers heard about Max Skladanowski and his 54mm. Because they're all doing this around the same time. Soon the Lumiere brothers were expanding their operations. What is most likely the first motion picture ever shot in Chicago. The still extant Chicago Police Parade. And it was titled Chicago Défilé des Policemen. Was made only months after the Lumiere's first cinematograph demonstration, and at the behest of the brothers themselves. Meanwhile, the projectors were also being developed in the United States. Or projectors, not the projectors. In contrast to Europe, where the movies were predictably invented in the cultural capital of Paris, the most important early experiments with motion picture projection in America took place not in New York or Los Angeles, which was still then a sleepy little town, but deep in the heart of the Midwest. Edward Ahmet of the Chicago suburb of Waukegan built the Magnoscope, an early prototype for the 35mm projector. How do we get a Waukegan native to invent the film industry, huh? And I'm speaking generally here. You all know. Waukegan's about an hour north from me. If Ahmet's and George Spore's later claims can be trusted, their earliest experiments with projecting 35mm movies in the suburbs of Chicago occurred in 1894 and would have predated the Lumiere brothers' similar and far more famous exhibition in Paris by a full year. Having been I'm talking a lot like Sean Connery lately. Fascinating. Having been fascinated by the Anschutz tachyoscope at the World's Fair, George Spohr, then a newspaper vendor, made a journey to downtown Chicago to see Edison's kinetoscope for himself. In an amusing anecdote that may be apocryphal, I'm not sure how to pronounce this one. Apocryphal. Spohr claimed that while he was leaning over and peering into the slot to watch the moving pictures of The Kiss, The Strong Man, and The Cockfight, someone picked his pocket. In his anger and frustration, it occurred to him that there had to be a better, safer way to exhibit motion pictures. If they were projected onto a large screen, not only would spectators be left in a less vulnerable position than they were while looking into a hole and turning the crank, but the films could be exhibited to many people at once, not just one at a time. All of these rapid advances in film production and the production technology were providing a major headache for Thomas Edison, whose scientific and business interests were already scattered far and wide. In April 1895, W.K.L. Dixon, Edison's employee, who had done most of the work inventing the kinetoscope and actually directed most of the early Edison films, left his boss to invent a projector of his own and start the successful American Mutoscope Company, which later became the American Mutoscope and Biograph Company, and subsequently the Biograph Company. American Mutoscope and Biograph would remain a chief rival of Edison manufacturing for more than a decade, producing many significant early films, including the earliest directorial efforts of D.W. Griffith. Edison never forgave Dixon for his defection. So you really have to wonder. You have Dixon and Tesla. Not too much mention of Tesla yet. Jason, where are you right by? Alright, continuing on. As popular as the kinetoscope and similar peep show machines had been, large-scale projection would be another matter entirely. A major technological breakthrough and a revelation to the first astonished moviegoers. In New York City, people were more than happy to line up around the block to see moving images that were bigger than life, being hurled onto giant canvas screens. Edison's primitive black Maria shorts began... Edison's primitive black Maria shorts of Eugene Sandow posing and his employee Fred Ott sneezing from 1894 and 1895 no longer seemed nearly as impressive. Big screens demanded bigger, more eye-filling images. While Edison stalled on inventing his own projector, he saw the Lumiere brothers' cinematograph take the world by storm. In 1897, Edison eventually caved, licensing his name to, and taking the credit for, the phantoscope. Phantoscope. A projector that had been co-invented by Charles Jenkins and Thomas Armat, but was promptly renamed Edison's Vitascope after Edison bought the patent. Having failed to secure an international patent on the kinetoscope, Edison vowed never to make the same mistake again, and patented his new device, ostensibly forcing anyone who wanted to show motion pictures projected onto a screen to pay him a royalty. Since everyone thought of Edison as the father of movies anyway, the public had no objection. Indeed, most people did not believe that projected movies had truly arrived until Edison's device hit the market. Many exhibitors had even held off on buying Many exhibitors had even held off on buying a projector until an official Edison model appeared. Before motion picture projection had ever occurred in Chicago proper, Edward Ahmet's experiments had all taken place in the suburbs. The Chicago Daily Tribune wrote with breathless excitement about the coming phenomenon. Quote, electrical experts have arrived from Edison's New Jersey establishment to set up and prepare for operation beginning July 5th, the wizard's latest and wonderful invention, the Vitoscope. The exhibition of which has created a sensation in the East. By the aid of this scientific apparatus, entire scenes from life are reproduced in complete realism. Every animate movement being thrown with distinctness on a huge screen occupying the stage space. An idea of the magnitude of the work is given in the description of the latest view shown in Boston, a 10-mile panoramic view of Niagara Falls from a moving train moving at the rate of 50 miles per hour, color and life being represented with perfect exactitude. So I'm taking a note on that. We'll look that up too. 20 from Waukegan. Dang, you're close, Jason. I didn't realize you lived that close to me. Alright, continuing on. The first film review to appear in a Chicago newspaper in the July 7th, 1896 edition of the Daily Tribune covered movies presented via, quote, Edison's, end quote, Vitoscope projection system only 2 days after the machine was first unveiled. So 2 days after it was unveiled, then they had their first movie review. It's pretty cool. Under the heading, quote, amusements, end quote, the following item appeared alongside the reviews of stage plays, operas, assorted vaudeville shows, and even carnival-style freak shows, e.g. The Young Man from San Francisco, whose hands span 13 inches across. Edison's wonderful Vitoscope is deservedly drawing enthusiastic audiences at Hopkins Theater. It is a decidedly novel and popular innovation. The scenes thrown upon the canvas include the serpentine dance of Annabelle and her famous wink, a sensational rescue by firemen, the march in the first act of a, quote, milk white flag, end quote, and a vivid reproduction of the ludicrous kissing scene between May Irwin and John C. Rice in, quote, The Widow Jones, end quote. Or that, I mean, those quotes are like the movie titles. So we got the 13-inch hands. We have Annabelle. The Annabelle wink. We got firemen. And then we got the titles, Milk White Flag, and The Widow Jones. And The Widow Jones is the first kiss. Alright, continuing on. Meanwhile, the possibility of motion pictures achieving instantaneous, widespread distribution meant that the world was rapidly becoming a smaller place. The popularity and financial success of the cinematograph led the Lumiere brothers to dispatch cameramen all over the world so that movie audiences could see, for the first time ever, real-time moving images of how people from different countries and cultures lived, worked, and played. Made in September 1896, the aptly titled Chicago Police Parade, Lumiere You know what? I have all the Lumiere. I have everything Lumiere. I should probably show some of that today. Yeah, you know what? I'll dig that out. I'll dig that out after I'm done with the chapter here. And I'll take a quick break with some music here playing. And then I'll come back here and we'll look at the Lumiere stuff. I think that'll be real cool today. And then if I can find anything else on YouTube with all that stuff, with the first, I guess with those first 30-second clips, we'll find those for another time. But if we can find a few of them for today, we'll do that too. All right, continuing on. Made in September 1896, the aptly titled Chicago Police Parade, Lumiere Catalog number 336, is an approximately 45-second long actuality. And it says here the term documentary did not exist yet. We're working on the actuality. We're working on the actuality. We're working on the actuality. Of 144 Chicago police officers walking down a wide street and past a stationary camera, the officers are formally dressed and carrying billy clubs. Amusingly, it appears that all but approximately 3 of the officers are sporting large mustaches. Nice. Bringing up the rear of the parade is a horse-drawn carriage. As with other Lumiere productions of the period, including their masterpiece, Arrival of a Train at La Ciotat, and I'm not going to try to pronounce that in French. The camera is positioned at an oblique angle so that the policemen appear to be walking diagonally from the rear of the frame to the front. This perspective puts greater emphasis on the depth of field of the image, with a clear demarcation of background, middle ground, and foreground, and also serves as a good example of just how well composed the Lumiere brothers' first films actually were, especially in contrast to the relatively flat-looking films being produced concurrently by Edison. Hey! So Edison was just a big old businessman that didn't want to have profits lost. And so he sabotaged other people's projects. Interesting, but, you know, I don't know. I gotta stop saying that. Okay, so we got a photograph here. It says Chicago Police Parade. So this is a still from that. And you can tell they're all wearing mustaches there. There we go. So I really do think that I have all of the Lumiere brothers. At least all their early stuff. So I will try digging that out before we end here today. We only got 3 pages left. No more pictures. All right, let's power through this, and then I will do my little digging for my hard drive in the back here, and I'll play some music and pictures while that happens. And we'll come right back. But yeah, let's finish this chapter here. Chicago Police Parade was not, however, made by either of the brothers themselves, but was instead created by one of their favorite cinematographers, a Frenchman of Italian descent named Alexandre Promio, whom the Chicago Post described in 1896 as having, quote, the reputation of being the greatest scientific photographer in all Europe, end quote. And it also says this exchange took place in England in 1909, a good indication of how widespread and for how long the belief was held that motion pictures were no more than a flash-in-the-pan novelty. That same year, Promio would become a major footnote in the motion picture history by effectively inventing camera movement when he took his cinematograph to Venice and placed it on board of a gondola. And for those of you who are not too sure about what a gondola is, I'll just try to bring up a photo of one here. There we go. He invented camera movement when he took his cinematograph to Venice and placed it on board one of these. The popularity of the movies and the attendant good publicity they could generate was not lost on Chicago City Hall, which had readily agreed to Promio's request to hold a fake police parade by Lake Michigan. A notice to the Daily Tribune in October of 1896 covered the production of Chicago Police Parade. Quote, M. Promio induced Assistant Chief Ross to marshal 600 policemen on the front lake, and while they were going through a drill, the Frenchman took some 6,000 or 8,000 photographs of them. He also took 2 or 3 street scenes, including the Ferris wheel. The photographs will be sent to Paris, where they will be prepared for the cinematograph in a few weeks and will be seen in Chicago. So first, I want to do the math on this. Let's just round up. Let's say he did 8,000 photographs, and they're talking like that because he's doing 16 frames of photos per second. That's 500 seconds divided by 60. That he did 8.5 minutes. So he went through like probably 10, 12 reels shooting that whole thing. Unfortunately, the additional footage shot by Promio in Chicago tantalizingly referred to in the Daily Tribune article no longer seems to exist. That sucks. Assuming that prints were ever made in the first place. Later ads for cinematograph exhibitions include references to Police Parade, one of which, dating from 1897, also refers to a movie intriguingly titled Life on State Street, though this may have been another title for a recent Edison film. Elsewhere in the same article, the Daily Tribune staffer covering the production clearly had a field day interviewing one M. Tet, a Lumiere representative who attempted to explain how exactly the cinematograph operated. Tet's explanation was hilariously rendered with his French accented words spelled out phonetically. It is simple as a baby. Tet is quoted as saying, this is going to be a fun quote here. Quote, I put the pictures in so and turn the crank so you see wonderful, beautiful things on the big curtain in the front. That is all. I cannot explain him better. End quote. The Daily Tribune staffer helpfully points out that this analogy is, quote, hardly fair, end quote, since, quote, nobody ever fully understood the mental and physical makeup of a baby, while the cinematograph is easily described, end quote. There's the well actually, people. the moment or the most significant extent. Well, this phrasing is a little weird. The most significant extant film to be made in Chicago after the Lumiere brothers' Chicago Police Parade is probably the Edison Manufacturing Company's corner Madison and State Streets, Chicago. So that is another one. Made only 1 year after the Lumiere's pioneering effort, the Edison film, copyrighted in July of 1897, is a 50-foot long one-shot actuality that depicts exactly what the title states. Like most of, quote, Edison's movies, unquote, however, the inventor's favorite director-cinematographer team of James H. White and William Heiss actually made corner Madison and State Street, Chicago. Although White and Heiss had both been prolific in the motion picture business since the pre-projection days of 1890, it does not appear that their technique had much improved in the intervening 7 years. When viewed alongside Chicago Police Parade, with its incredible use of depth of field and impeccably composed diagonal lines, Corner and Madison State Streets, Chicago offers an object lesson in the difference between Thomas Edison and the Lumiere brothers, i.e. the difference between approaching movies as a business versus approaching them as an art. Corner Madison and State Streets, Chicago shows a jumbled mass of people, horses, and trolley cars in the heart of Chicago's loop as they hurriedly move in every conceivable direction at the time. Some of the subjects are carrying large placards that advertise, quote, boating, end quote, and, quote, electric pool, end quote. Just as Chicago Police Parade is of interest because it proves that 99% of all Chicago police officers had mustaches in the late 19th century, so too is Corner Madison and State Streets, Chicago, of interest because it proves that 100% of all Chicago civilians, including women, wore hats. During this same era. And in the middle of summer, no less. In terms of visual style, it appears that White and Heiss have taken little care with the composition of the image, which looks particularly chaotic when compared to the clean lines and artful compositions associated with the Lumieres. You know, I think just some of these, like the city shots, like what you just said, the corner, it's so fascinating seeing like the busyness of downtown in general that I'm sure they were like, just put the tripod down and let it run and just capture whatever's here. Just capture the reality of the moment. And I'm actually fine with filmmakers approaching things that way. And then you have the Lumiere brothers on the other side, but it was actually these other guys that shot it. So what we're talking about here is a lot of pioneering film companies who sent their employees and their students out to go capture all this stuff. And they made some of the most groundbreaking films at the time, which I think is pretty damn cool. So White and Heiss were more of the realistic approach, and the Lumiere brothers, and Promio in particular, because Promio is the one that got it for the Lumiere brothers for the Chicago Police Parade. Promio was more about the visual art of everything instead of just plopping a camera down and capturing whatever's going on. You get to that angle, and then you create that depth of field, and then that changed everything, apparently. So that's pretty cool. Continuing on, The complete description of Corner Madison and State Street, Chicago, from the official Edison Films catalog emphasizes the documentary value of showing the downtown area of this thriving metropolis. Quote, the busiest corner in Chicago. Cable cars and street traffic of all descriptions. Hundreds of shoppers. Fine perspective view looking north toward the Masonic Temple. 50 feet. $7.50. End quote. Andrew Erish, E-R-I-S-H, in his excellent biography, Colonel William N. Selig, the man who invented Hollywood, claims that Corner Madison and State Street, Chicago, was a William Selig film that Edison pirated and copyrighted as his own. Most other sources, however, cite it as an authentic Edison movie. Edison copyrighted Corner Madison and State Street, Chicago, along with several other Chicago shot films on July 31st, 1897. Sheep Run, Chicago Stockyards, Our Moore's Electric Trolley, A-R-M-O-U-R-S, or O-R apostrophe S, Cattle Driven to Slaughter, etc. So 1, 2, 3, 4 different ones there. And those 4 might actually be stolen, for all we know. Because it sounds like Edison had a knack for finding other people's stuff and then copywriting it before anyone could have success with it. And if he was starting to steal films after a while, that's really, really, really bad. Selig Polyscope copyrighted a similarly titled movie, State and Madison's STS dot, Chicago. So, like, they just took out the streets in Chicago in 1903. Selig Polyscope copyrighted a similarly titled movie. So, Edison copyrighted it in 1897. Why did Selig wait 6 years to apply for the copyright? That makes no sense. I would say that Edison did, in fact, have one of his employees shoot that Chicago street scene. Because if it was the busiest corner in Chicago, I'm sure a lot of people noticed that. And if Selig Polyscope really made that movie before Edison, it sucks to be you then, Selig. I don't know what else to say. I believe that they're 2 different ones, and Edison may have stole it, but we'll give him the benefit of the doubt that Edison did not steal that shot because it was so prominent of a location. It would be like going and filming like any building, any landmark. All right, and finishing up here, we got a few more paragraphs, and we're done with chapter 3 here. Although it was around this time that Colonel William Selig explicitly copied the Lumiere's cinematograph design in order to get into the motion picture business for himself, he seemed to be almost alone in understanding the far-reaching possibilities of the new medium. Founded in 1896, the Selig Polyscope Company would be the first movie studio in Chicago and eventually the largest one in the country. When asked by a journalist if he thought that the motion picture had, quote, come to stay, end quote, Selig responded with unbridled enthusiasm, quote, come to stay, end quote, he exclaimed with an exclamation point. Quote, why, it has only just started. I believe that it will become a permanent feature in the amusements of the public. End quote. Unlike Edison and even the Lumieres, who notoriously claimed that the cinema was an invention, quote, without a future, end quote. Wow. Both of them thought that it wouldn't last. The Lumieres and Edison. Wow. Colonel Selig was gambling big on the movies. It was a gamble that would soon pay off. In a few years' time, he would be referred to as, quote, the man who invented Hollywood. Although the projection of moving images had first occurred with Muybridge and Anschutz at the Columbian Exhibition and had not been particularly successful on the commercial front, in the ensuing years, using moving pictures for entertainment had proven to be increasingly profitable. Combining the notion of narrative storytelling with motion picture projection would soon turn the movies into a giant of mass media that would help to define the next century and beyond. If this kind of future was lost on Edison and the Lumieres completely, William Selig and his future rival George Spohr seemed to have grasped it almost instinctively. Setting up shop in Chicago, a city large enough and with enough ambition that it could handle a new industry and provide all the opportunities and advantages necessary for inventions, innovations, and of course paying audiences for products, both men then went to work. So we're about to see a civil war here. William Selig, which if we look at his early life, I think we'll know. And then George Spohr. See, these guys are all Freemasons, and they're all connected to the same stuff all the time. What's up with that? And that is the end of chapter 3. That's the end of the reading for part 3 today. Chapter 4 next week. Mr. Selig himself. I don't know. What does he look like to you? Mustache man. Oh, you know what? He looks like a chill guy. Look at this. There we go. Imagine meeting that guy in the street. Oh, yes, yes, yes. Yes, moving pictures. Yes, yes. Very cool. You know, if anything else, I can say that Selig is a very presentable guy. So chapter 4 is going to be all about Colonel William Selig and his first film studio here in Chicago. And he is going to be going to war with George Spohr. That should be interesting. So let's see. I'm just going to look over here. I go through this and look at the different photographs, chapters. Yeah, so the next one's another 10 pages. So that's not going to be too bad. But that's that. If you want to get this book, it's on Amazon. It's both in hardcover and paperback. I have the hardcover, but paperback is a lot cheaper. Save about $50 on that. And I do want to try experimenting here with finding the Lumiere Brothers stuff and coming back. So how does that sound? We do a break. I go find that footage, and then we look at a few of these Lumiere projects. It's either I do that now, or I save that for next week. But I want to show at least one clip today, so we'll do that. We'll see. So let me get this going. I gotta bring up the audio here. So I have this like royalty-free music. Yeah, it's gonna be same time next week, Jason. So Saturday, 11:05 a.m. and we should be able to start right on time. Yeah, I'm just going through all of my project notes here. Okay, so I'm gonna go off for just a short break, and I'm gonna get my hard drive that has the Lumiere Brothers on it. All right, we're back, everyone. So I believe... Wow. Okay. I have an hour and a half's worth of Lumière Le Cinématographe from 1895 to 1905. And this is a compilation that was released in 2015. Wow. Yeah, and all of these are silent films, so it's really nothing. Unless they had a like a log where they know what music they played with the silent movies. I don't know why it took me so long to think about that. I guess I'll have to go through these because this is a whole thing. It's a 2015 remaster in 1080p. 10 years of the Lumiere brothers. So we'll probably see these films, these shorts that we just talked about in today's. And just so that we don't waste any more time here. I'll give you guys a quick view of this, and then we will get into much more detail with this later. I just want to give you a sneak peek. See, this looks like a factory letting everyone out for the day from work. So my homework for next week is to go through all of this, and I will clip this entirely so that we have each individual part to show. Hey, here's the dog. Guy with a bike, a horse and carriage. Man, our society's really fell. This looks really good. I think this is 35 mil. Because they're moving in real time. And that's them getting off the ship. So we actually read about this short a few chapters ago. Them all getting off of the ferry. The guy with the... Howdy. That's awesome. We're looking at a 140-year-old film here. Alright, we'll do one more, and then I'll save the rest for next week. Oh, there's a blacksmith. Or no, we might get the cockfights in this. I'll keep going. So this is the blacksmith. I wonder if the seminary girl's short is in this too. It should be. I'm glad they were able to save a lot of this. Most films are all lost to time. There, watering your garden. The smock on. Gonna splash his face. Oh, he's stepping on the hose. Just spanking him. Hey guys, can I join? It looks like you got a spot at the table. Yes. What's that device you have, Steve? Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I'm just the same as yours. Same as yours. So they say this was digitally restored, but they didn't clean up any of the flickering or the dust. I've seen this one before. I've seen a lot of these before, actually, but this one is very prominent. And I believe there was a colorization that was made of this. Yeah, it's on YouTube somewhere. But this is a great shot. And again, on an angle like the police parade, where you get all that depth of field there. Are they knocking a building down? Knocking the last wall of a building down. Or maybe the other side's still there. See, I wonder why they did this. I'm sure, like, not all of these things were, like, structurally unsafe. But you see our ancestors just destroying a lot of our buildings. And here's just one. Well, what are they playing it backwards for? So we're watching Lumiere Brothers silent films from 1895 to 1905. This should have everything in it, but it's an hour and a half long. So we'll watch a few more of these, we'll call it. Maybe we could watch a little bit of these every week. until we get through it all. Chapter 2. Okay, we'll stop there. Okay, everyone. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. And my apologies for taking 3 weeks, but editing program issues have been resolved, and it was within the last half hour before I went live today. So, next week, Chapter 4, Part 2 of the book, Part 4 of this deep dive series. And yeah, we're making some good progress. I feel more familiar with Edison, the Lumiere brothers, and I have to look at what that Selig guy. William Selig. Okay, everyone. That is it for today. Tomorrow I will be doing another live, but it'll be a general live for me to talk about this channel and just everything that I've been doing, just so that I don't muddy up all the other deep dives with giving updates about what's been going on. So tomorrow will be an update for the channel. Be here tomorrow, same time, 11:05, and we'll probably just go an hour. And in that, I will tell you my plans of what my future projects I want to do, how I'm planning to lay all that out, and eventually, I hope my updates will be kept for Sundays, and then as we do the deep dives through the week, I don't have to go and give updates then. It'll be a lot more streamlined and focused on the topic at hand. So that's it. I hope you all are doing well. See you all tomorrow. And if you haven't watched my deep dives, go back and watch that. I have a few interviews up too from the beginning of the year with Nadine Askey and John Carmen. So go check those out. And I'll be having both of them on again soon. So until the next one, class dismissed.